Somehow I feel like some people didn't learn their lesson from Together With Me the Next chapter. Okay, so today we have a video I was hoping I wouldn't have to make, but here we are. So if I seem more angry or bitter than usual, it's because I am. My favorite show and my favorite character have been ruined after all. So let's start from the start. I Thought Sunset About You is my favorite Thai series alongside Project S, Skate or Souls. The only ones to get a perfect score for me. And Tae, especially the main character of the show, was everything to me in ways I don't have time to explain in this video. This video is about how I Promised You the Moon, its sequel, took everything I and pretty much everyone loved about the original show and tossed it right out the window. A few things before we start. Obviously full spoilers for I Promised You the Moon and I Thought Sunset About You. I am also aware that some people did like this sequel, but I will address what people use to defend this show over and over again at the end of this video, because I have to address what went wrong beforehand. So if you're here to defend I Promised You the Moon to your death, please at least watch my whole video. And lastly, I know that the actors, screenwriters and director have been getting a lot of hate since the release of this terrible episode 3. And I just want to make it clear that I'm not making this video to spread any more hate onto them. That being said, I consider I Promised You the Moon to be the greatest failure of a sequel after such a perfect show like I Thought Sunset About You. Like truly for me, this is a flop like I've never seen before. And for info, I do have a full video on why sequels suck. So even though the crew that worked so hard on this sequel doesn't deserve any hate, their work certainly does. I also considered binging the I Promised You the Moon documentary to try and make sense of what the director and screenwriter wanted, but I must admit I was too hurt to put myself through that. But I Promised You the Moon does stand on its own and shouldn't need a documentary to make sense of it. So to start lightly, let's start with what I liked in I Promised You the Moon. The acting and chemistry were just as amazing as they were in I Thought Sunset About You, though I don't think anyone would have doubted that. Bilkin is for me truly one of the most impressive actors I've seen in the last couple years. PP is amazing, Hope did great as Jai even though his role sucked, and even Guy, who I had never seen in a bigger role, really impressed me. The cinematography was still great, though in my opinion it was not as great as in I Thought Sunset About You. And that's in big part because the setting in Bangkok was just not as beautiful as the setting in Phuket. Sorry. The soundtrack was still a bop, though again still not as memorable as the one in season 1 in my opinion. I like that they showed the discrimination that OL faced as a more effeminate man trying to get into acting, though it did stay pretty surface level as he quit acting right after. It's one of the storylines I wish would have been developed more. I also liked how they continued to show the social inequalities between Tae and OL by showing Tae in a dorm while OL has this big ass room, and he also makes friends with other rich kids who have a pool in their home. It did contribute pretty well to the character of OL, who is fickle in his choices simply because he will never have to suffer their consequences fully, since he'll always be able to run back to his rich parents and work on their resorts. Sadly, again for me, it wasn't explored nearly enough, and I honestly think this could have been a source of tension between Tae and OL instead of whatever the fuck we got. I like that they showed how hard university can be, with OL feeling lonely and changing majors. But again, and I think you have realized the pattern, this was extremely surface level and could have been way more developed. So now we're moving on to what I disliked or simply hated. Firstly, as you've seen from most of the points I liked, they all stayed very surface level. What I adored from I Thought Sunset About You that I felt hadn't been done so well in a series before was how everything ran deeper than it looked like, and how things always paralleled each other perfectly. Oh, OL is always seen wearing red, and Thorne's bra that we saw for like 1 second was purple. Let's have a scene where Tae has to choose between a purple or a red crayon and chooses the red, showing that even though he's telling otherwise to everyone, OL is number one in his heart. I Thought Sunset About You is full to the brim of these kinds of parallels that make the writing feel so intentional on every single detail and makes the bad writing of I Promised You the Moon hurt even more. Here, none of these parallels are here. There is the OL bringing flowers to Tae after a play parallel, and the amulet making an appearance once or twice parallel, and that's kinda it. The tightness in which everything was perfectly coordinated in I Told Sunset About You is gone, and it all feels empty. Speaking of emptiness, what was the goal of I Promised You the Moon? Because I Told Sunset About You's goal was, as you can guess, incredibly clear. Telling the coming of age story of Tae through his lifelong relationship with OL and the way the two men influenced each other's lives. But I Promised You the Moon? I'm not sure. Was it to show that couples pull apart? That people cheat? That Tae and OL are meant to be together even though this very sequel showed us that they are terrible together? Because apart from these three things, the only thing I can think about is we wanted to keep writing this relationship and characters that are obviously so beloved. Which is never the way to know if you should make a sequel or not. Just because you can keep producing something and people will watch doesn't mean you should. And I'm exhausted of seeing sequels that not only added nothing to the original story, but actually took away from it. Apart from that, I feel like the things that could have been exploited from season 1 to this sequel weren't. All of I Told Sunset About You is about Tae being deeply repressed. And at the end of the show, the only obstacle on his coming out journey is his mom, because he's afraid to tell her. And in I Promised You the Moon, that's resolved in 5 minutes. Now, I want to make it very clear that I didn't want to see Tae's mom be biphobic, because absolutely not. But I wish they wouldn't have glossed over this aspect so much. It's similar to the very last scene where Tae, a famous new actor, kisses OL publicly and it's leaked on social media. Like, that in itself could have made a super interesting sequel. To see how queer actors are regarded by the Thai public. I just feel like all of the more LGBTQ+ aspects that were so wonderfully explored in I Told Sunset About You were completely discarded. Now, one thing that particularly annoyed me in this sequel was the time jumps. I Told Sunset About You took place over a few months. And while yes, it does have a couple of unimaginative time jumps, they do not happen every half hour like they did in I Promised You the Moon. Here, by making the characters go through the entirety of their university careers in 5 episodes, they can never explore anything fully. We barely see OL struggling with loneliness in a big city. That miracle! We've jumped ahead a few months and now he's making friends. They're broken up, and miracle, now we're a year later, right before they get back together. This is not only lazy, especially in the way they did it with a simple text on the screen, but again it prevents any real development to be made because every storyline gets fast forwarded through by its own writers. I would have tolerated time jumps if they were done using an imaginative trick like showing the date change on a calendar, because yes, seeing characters through their whole university careers is actually a very interesting plot, but not for this story and these characters and not in this little time. I Told Sunset About You was a romance mixed with a coming-of-age story, and the fiercely fast way at the way this sequel went, while also not showing anything significant for most of its episodes, does not allow for this type of stories to thrive. And now we are at the obviously big element of this video, Tae cheating on OL. So I have talked about why a cheating storyline is never the move in my video on why I hate sequels so much. But I'm gonna have to reiterate, because apparently writers cannot get it through their thick skulls that cheating is not the way to add drama to a relationship. So I think we can all agree that cheating is very bad. It's something that sadly happens all too often, because as human beings we are very bored creatures that rather hurt each other than separate and be alone. It's something that entirely destroys someone's confidence. And it's, apart from more toxic or criminal stuff, the worst thing you can do to your partner. So to have Tae not only kiss Jai after a few signs of his attraction to him are shown by the camera, but also leaving OL at a restaurant table after OL forgave him once for kissing Jai, to go confess to Jai. Like, how? Tell me how anyone who has seen the way the writers build up Tae and OL's soulmate-like relationship in I Told Sunset About You is gonna be okay with Tae confessing his feelings to a guy he's liked for like a grand total of 5 minutes. In the most romantic way. You're my big fan, bitch! Tell me why this is the most romantic confession Tae has ever made though. Tell me why Tae and Jai's kiss was way more passionate than any of Tae and OL's kisses. And most of it all, what was the goddamn point? Because the cheating does not only make Tae a terrible character, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute, but it's literally showing that Tae doesn't respect OL in any tangible way. It's throwing away the way that through every single obstacle in I Told Sunset About You, Tae and OL were meant to be together, over an attraction that was developed 5 minutes before the kiss scene. An attraction that's so strong though, that Tae confesses his feelings to Jai. What do you think would have happened if Jai didn't reject him? He would have dropped OL so fast. I legit can't believe these are the genius writers from I Told Sunset About You. Oh wait, it's not, except for one of them. Yeah, maybe that explains things. Now let's talk about maybe what kills me the most. As much as I love Tae and OL's relationship, I adore Tae as a character even more. And this sequel made him so unrecognizable. I legitimately feel like Tae in I Told Sunset About You and Tae in I Promised You the Moon are two different people. Because don't get me wrong, Tae in I Told Sunset About You was incredibly flawed. Yet every single flaw was balanced by a just as lovable quality about him. Tae in I Told Sunset About You would wake up at 4 a.m. to help OL study. He'd give him his flashcards and cut up his own studying book for him. He'd give up his place at his dream university for OL, because that's how dedicated to OL he was. Tae in I Promised You the Moon humiliates OL in front of his friends. Is disappointed that he has dyed his hair and is dressing trendier. Doesn't care about his good results in school. Won't invite him to see plays with him. And most importantly, cheats on him at the first occasion. This Tae has no good to balance it all. He simply treats OL as garbage for most of the sequel, and miraculously still gets OL in the end for some reason, without having done anything to deserve it. And it hurts to see that such an amazing character that meant so much to me has become a shadow of what he was. And a character that you can't, in good conscience, root for. And while the writers made Tae become the villain of his own story, they erased all of OL's flaws and made him feel like a side character more than anything. Which is ironic considering Pippi is the one singing the most songs on the soundtrack for I Promised You the Moon, while Belkin was the one to sing more songs in I Told Sunset About You. What made I Told Sunset About You great was that for every shitty thing Tae did, OL matched him with a shitty thing of his own. The relationship and the way the characters were written felt equal. They were equally as flawed as each other, which is why they were a perfect match. But here OL's only flaw was to change his major because he's fickle about what he wants to do in life, which doesn't in any way match Tae's gross behavior in this season. And that makes OL too smooth and perfect of a character in comparison to Tae, and honestly made him feel like a side character. Don't get me wrong, I'm still team OL all the way in this sequel, but both characters' morals went on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And there was no way it would work as the character development in both directions was non-existent. Now there's a lot to say about screenwriters being unable to write an established relationship successfully. It's something that is not only prevalent in BL or Thai series, but in every media of the world. And that's simply because seeing people get together is almost always more exciting than seeing them be together after 3 years. There are exceptions, of course, but it seems to be universal that writers don't know how to write an established relationship without creating some over-the-top drama between them. There were so many routes the writers could have gone for. Tae coming out, OL struggling with his loneliness in a big city and changing majors, OL facing discrimination in the acting industry for being more effeminate, Tae coming out as an established actor, or even them growing apart before eventually getting back together. But mostly the only way to write an established relationship successfully, even while showing its struggles, is to write them as a team working together for a common goal. If the writers had done any of that, Tae and OL ending up together, even after breaking up because they fell out of love or something else, would have made way more sense. And there's also something to say about Tae being a bisexual character cheating. We all know the stereotype that bisexuals are cheaters that get with everyone. And I don't think that means that bisexual characters can't ever cheat, but I also think the writers need to be a little more careful about how it's executed. Because on the other hand, the show portrayed OL, a gay character, as nothing short of perfect and incapable of cheating on Tae. He doesn't even move on with his friend a year after they broke up. And it just sends the message that OL would have never cheated on Tae. And with the way things were written, he never would have. But Tae would. And I don't see why he would as a bisexual man when it contradicts the obsession and adoration he had for OL in Aito Sunset About You.
I also think the issue is the fact that Jai is also a bisexual character that is portrayed as slutty, as using people for his play, just portrayed really badly. And that just sends the message in general that if your two bisexual characters are kind of just shit people in general, while the gay characters are all kind of little perfect angels, shady for me, folks, shady.
And in general, I feel that it's very sad that writers are incapable of writing an established, happy, queer relationship for more than 10 minutes. Because yes, every couple has its hurdles, but the LGBTQ plus community deserves its happy queer relationships after centuries of oppression. After decades of being the butt of the joke, the villain, or the one who dies in movies and series. And I promise you the moon could have delivered on that, but chose not to. But then they had the audacity of having them end up together anyway. After 5 episodes of Tae treating OL like shit, them pulling apart since the very day they arrived in Bangkok, we have Tae coincidentally falling in love with OL again after seeing him once. And OL fucking forgiving him, of course, when he's done nothing to be forgiven. Like, Tae got his redemption storyline, even though he did nothing to get it, for literally zero reason other than in the hopes of making the fans happy. And guess what? I'm not fucking happy. You can't serve us a pile of shit for 5 episodes straight and then put a fucking purple flower on top of it and call it a day. That's not how gastronomy works, and that's not how series work either. So what was the point? I know some of you are gonna ask me how I would have fixed it, or if I would have preferred Tae and OL didn't end up together. And about that, the series would have felt worse if they had taken their time to make a full sequel, only to break apart the couple they spent all of season 1 building up. So for me, no matter what, I wouldn't have been satisfied. Even without Tae's character assassination and the cheating, the writing and execution was just far worse in the sequel anyway. Because I Thought Sunset About You was already perfect as it is. It had the angst, the cuteness, and so many ups and downs that all culminated in the growth of Tae and OL as characters and in their relationship. There was nothing to add, and we should learn to accept that things end. And that while we might never get more content, that great thing still exists and can be enjoyed again. Because here, that great thing that I adored so much has been ruined by an unnecessary, badly written and executed sequel. So before we wrap it up, I want to address common defenses of the show I've received and seen online. But first of all, I have to talk about how weird it is that people are defending this show like it's their ugly unborn son people are criticizing behind their back. Where did this metaphor come from? I don't know. I just really dislike babies. It feels like people have a real stake in people not talking shit about the show that clearly messed up and clearly hurt a lot of our feelings. And part of it, I feel, is honestly projection. I've seen some people sharing their own story of them cheating on their partner in defense of the show. And for me, it just showed me that some people took it personally because they hate being confronted with the fact that most people think that cheating is a terrible thing to do. I also feel like on the other end, people enjoy Tae and Jai's kiss a little too much, and even just in general the more explicit content this season had, and forgave all the rest. Like, I know that some people watch BL only for the gay making out, which is an issue on its own. Because their first and biggest defense of the show is that people cheat, it's realistic. And yes, as I've already acknowledged, we as humans love the drama of hurting another person's perception of themselves and confidence in us. And when I say us, I'm not saying me, I've been single forever and I don't cheat. Thank you. But was cheating really the only way the show could be realistic? Is it the only outcome that a relationship can have to create some drama? Because I don't agree. I simply think cheating doesn't work with the way Tae and OL were established as basically soulmates in I Told Sunset About You. I also think cheating was not what most of the viewers wanted from a BL series that are known for being really fluffy and happy. And I'm all for artists like following their vision, but also when you're making a commercial kind of art in the form of a series, you have to take into account what the fans are expecting, at least a little bit. And what the fans wanted to see was Tae and OL's relationship bloom, not wither. The second biggest argument for the show was that Tae made a mistake and that we should all let it go. And I've already disproved this argument by showing how much of a piece of shit Tae was throughout the whole show and not this one time. Maybe kissing Jai would have been a mistake, but then leaving OL to go confess to him after OL found out, singing alongside his boyfriend while looking longingly at Jai in front of him, and just generally being a bad boyfriend to OL and a shit friend to Kim as well, is not making a mistake. The only mistake I see here is the writers making Tae so unrecognizable he became the own villain of his story. And the last excuse I saw thrown around a lot was that Tae just did to OL what he did to Tarn, that it was usual for him. In I Told Sunset About You, Tae starts slowly falling in love with OL while he has promised Tarn a relationship. And that is a very shitty thing to do. That being said, it's matched by OL hurting Bass just the same. And it doesn't hold the same weight as Tae is not officially with Tarn, he's still in high school and very immature as portrayed on the show. In I Promise You the Moon, Tae is a full-blown adult. He has been with OL for 3 goddamn years. And we have already witnessed his beautiful character development in the previous season. All of that indicates that he should know better. But he doesn't because, as I've said multiple times today, the writers ruined his character. So no, Tae is not supposed to be a fickle-minded man who leaves their significant other as soon as he finds someone's better. Because what I Told Sunset About You showed us is that Tae hurt Tarn and OL hurt Bass because they were meant to be together. Tae hurt OL because the writers wanted so for shock value. So to conclude, I regret lying to myself and all of you. In my video on the shows I was the most excited to watch in 2021, I actually forgot to talk about I Promise You the Moon. Okay, hi, I'm editing this and I'm realizing I forgot about I Told Sunset About You Part 2. And it's honestly very telling of how not excited for it I was. As you've understood from this video and my dedicated one on sequels, I'd always much prefer an amazing series where I love the story and characters and on an amazing ending, rather than drag it out for too long until I don't love the characters and story as much as I used to. The only sequels I've ever liked were ones where the original season was mediocre so the sequel could only be better, like Dark Blue Kiss or Friendzone 2, or when a season 2 was planned since the beginning, like Lovesick the series. Which is ironic considering I Promise You the Moon was also probably planned since the beginning, since it was previewed on the last episode of I Told Sunset About You. But even though I hate sequels, I still try to hype myself up for it because I saw how excited others were. And even when the trailer announced a disappointment, I still try to look at the bright side. And this whole time, I should have just followed my gut feeling and waited until the end of I Promise You the Moon before maybe giving it a try. And knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have given it a try. With this video, I wanted to put all of my feelings about this disaster into one thing that can exist on the internet forever and try to forget about it. Because I don't want to like I Told Sunset About You, Tae as a character and his relationship with OL less. They brought me so much happiness in 2020, and I don't want it to be ruined by its sequel. I just want to be over it. So this was my video on the topic, as a few of you guys have asked me, and now I just want to move on. It's sad to have come to this, but hey, at least now I know that I can't even trust my favorite show of all time to give me an acceptable sequel. So ban all of them, thank you. Anyways, I hope you still enjoyed this less fun video than usual, and I hope you'll still have, like I will too, a great day.